Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are diving into an absolutely massive academic breakthrough. For over 600 years, history has been sitting on this completely unsolved cold case. It's a bizarre, ancient book written in a totally alien script that has literally baffled the greatest codebreakers on Earth. But a new 2026 paper by independent researcher Mohammed Rabi Abdallah claims to have finally cracked it. And you know what the craziest part is? He didn't even use linguistics to do it. He used theoretical physics. So get ready, because we're about to explore exactly how science just solved the ultimate historical puzzle.
Now, to really appreciate this breakthrough, we've got to set the historical stage. The Voynich Manuscript, officially known as MS 408, was actually carbon dated to somewhere between 1404 and 1438 AD. It is this incredibly dense 240-page medieval text just completely packed with an unknown script. And it's got these weird, unidentifiable plants, complex astronomical diagrams, and bizarre illustrations of naked women bathing in green liquids. It totally vanished into history until a book dealer named Wilfred Voynich rediscovered it back in 1912. Since then, total brick wall. But jumping ahead to 2026, Abdallah's new decipherment model brings a completely new paradigm to the table.
So that brings us to the really big question. How do you read a book that literally has no language? Because that is the core mystery we're dealing with here. Abdallah's paper proposes a completely radical shift in perspective. It argues that to read this text, we have to completely stop treating it like a traditional language. For centuries, right, people have been trying to map these symbols to Latin or Arabic or Semitic languages, and every single attempt completely failed. Why? Well, because as the researcher points out, the Voynich manuscript isn't just written, it's engineered.
Section 1, 3 Historical Dead Ends. Let's look at why every cryptographer for the last century, including top military codebreakers, hit a total wall. Past attempts basically failed because of 3 huge false assumptions. First up, the linguistic assumption. Everyone just assumed the manuscript was in a natural spoken language. Turns out it's not. Second, the substitution assumption. People thought, oh, it's a simple cipher, just swap the letter A for a specific symbol. Yeah, that didn't work either. And finally, linear reading. Everyone assumed that because it's a European book, you just naturally read it from top left to bottom right. The paper argues that these 3 dead ends doomed all those previous attempts from the very start. To solve this, they literally had to wipe the board clean.
Moving on to Section 2, filtering the noise. Here is where the new methodology comes in. The researcher approached this ancient manuscript not as a linguist looking for words, but as a physicist looking at raw data. The absolute game changer here is something called discontinuous entropic calculus, or DEC. Now, to visualize how this branch of physics actually works, imagine a teenager texting their friend, but they just spam 50 random emojis between every single word so their parents can't understand the message if they glance at the screen. The emojis are the noise, right? And the actual words are the signal. Well, the paper claims the medieval author did the exact same thing, and DEC is simply the mathematical filter used to identify and strip away all those medieval emojis. By applying that DEC mathematical filter to measure symbol distribution, the researcher found something incredible. 35% of the book's symbols are completely meaningless. They're just intentional noise. They're decorative traps added by the author to deliberately mislead any casual observer or snooping authority figure. Once you mathematically strip away that 35% of pure gibberish, you're left with the 65% meaningful signal. So for the very first time in 600 years, the actual encrypted text was completely exposed. Section 3, reversing the flow. Now, even with the noise removed, the text still kind of looked like nonsense. The code was breaking, but the flow of information was still completely broken. That is, until the researcher applied an entropic time equation. See, the old assumption, the one that stumped everyone for over a century, was the standard European flow, left to right, top to bottom. But by tracking the direction of the information flow, literally mapping how the entropy of the text naturally resolves itself, the paper proved that the author wrote the book completely backwards. No joke. To read the Voynich manuscript, you have to read right to left and, remarkably, from the bottom of the page all the way to the top. This reverse direction is the main reason everyone else completely failed.
Let's actually walk through this mechanically, just so you can see exactly how to read a page. Step 1, you anchor your eyes at the very bottom right corner of the page. Step 2, you read that bottom line from right to left, kind of like you would in Arabic or Hebrew. Step 3, when you finish the line, you move up to the next line above it and go right to left again. I know, it completely defies Western intuition, but once you apply this flow to that filtered 65% of the text, the chaos suddenly transforms into perfectly legible data.
Section 4, the 4 quadrants. Once this whole methodology was applied to all 240 pages, the true structure of the manuscript finally emerged. Order was brought to the chaos, dividing the book into 4 distinct sections.
The mathematical algorithm neatly divided the book into 4 distinct entropic quadrants. First, the herbal quadrant. This is basically a botanical encyclopedia of 150 plants. For example, folio warned R translates to a description of the aloe vera plant, and it actually warns the reader that while it treats burns, taking it orally is poisonous. Then there's the astronomical quadrant, which contains agricultural calendars. Translating folio 68R tells the reader to observe Venus in May to decide whether to delay planting melons. Pretty specific, right? The balneological quadrant details therapeutic water baths for joint pain. And finally, the smallest but absolute most chaotic section with the highest entropy level of 0.95, the key.
Section 5, the final decipherment. The key quadrant is literally just 2 pages long, but it represents the absolute climax of this incredible 600-year investigation. The paper identifies folio 86V as the author's ultimate scientific testament. After applying the noise filter and reading backwards from the bottom up, out popped a direct Latin translation. It reads, "Let the reader understand. This work is not vain, but a treasury of nature." It actually goes on to give direct decryption instructions. It tells the reader to purge their mind of thoughts, to look at the figures of the roots and compare them with the signs of the heavens, and to mix them with water and oil for health. The author clearly spells out the secret of the book, ending with this super ominous warning. Beware that it does not fall into the hands of fools. So this leaves us with the ultimate lingering question. Who was the architect who actually went through the painstaking trouble of writing a 240-page physics-defying puzzle filled with 35% intentional noise, written entirely backwards and from the bottom up? Well, based on the translated text in folio 86V, where the author literally writes, "I wrote this in the year of our Lord 1440 in the monastery of St. Benedict," and by matching the historical entropy signatures, the paper identifies the author. It was an anonymous Dominican monk. He was working in the library at the Monte Cassino Abbey in Italy around 1440 AD. The paper posits that his motive was incredibly serious. He was burying his vast medical, botanical, and astronomical encyclopedia in complex math and backwards text to protect this scientific knowledge from church persecution during the Middle Ages. He wasn't some crackpot. He was a desperate scientist trying to preserve a true treasury of nature. Which brings us to a final, pretty provocative thought. The Voynich Manuscript is no longer just a hoax or some unsolvable magical book. It's a real testament to human ingenuity, finally unlocked by modern theoretical physics. But think about it. If an algorithm designed to measure entropy can effectively separate noise from signal and decode the most mysterious book in the world, what else can it do? Could this discontinuous entropic calculus be the key to finally reading the ancient Indus Valley script? Or what about the famously unsolved crypto sculpture sitting right now at CIA headquarters? This explainer really shows us that when we stop looking at mysteries through the same tired lenses and start looking at the underlying physics of the data, the impossible suddenly becomes entirely readable. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into the Voynich decipherment. What mystery do you hope physics solves next? Keep learning, and I'll see you in the next explainer.